Thank you very much. I'm very pleased for this invitation, ladies and gentlemen. An honor to start this important discussion. I will focus on the responsibility we all have and face. In a sense, if you allow me, shared responsibility for human security, shared understood in a different way from the traditional UN bureaucrats, although obviously I'm one of them. I start from the basic consideration that security is a concern which we all have about ourselves to begin with. It's part of our human nature to aspire to gain security, whether it's food security, security on the streets, security from job security, and whatever else. And indeed, we want to feel secure in our homes, in our streets, within our borders, as our culture, or even as part of a certain fate. And we want our children to be secure. It's very congenital to our species, just like for other in the animal world, to feel that those who we have created will be sheltered from violence and drugs and violence and sexual predators and so forth. Yet we seem to be very concerned about ourselves. We seem to be very self-centered or family-centered or clan-centered. But we see a junkie laying down in an alley, or we see a prostitute on the side of an important street or side roads, and we see them, perhaps these people, badly affected by whatever happened to them. All too often we seem to turn away and just continue our life because it is there, and I stress this proposition, their problem. It is a benign neglect that it happens on a global scale. We just had a session at the United Nations about the situation in Africa. Yes, lots of, at the UN I meant this morning, a lot of grandiose statement, a lot of rhetorical statement, but in a sense, it is very much their problem. At most, our humanitarian consideration motivate us to help them. But going back to our own security, drug users are put in a ghetto, at least mentally and psychologically. They are a margin of our society. Women forced into sex slavery are treated at times in so many legislation. Only recently this has changed in some countries, are treated as criminals rather than victims. If they are arrested, they very often are sent back, repatriated. Again, we see all of this as their problem more than our problem. And I believe that this attitude calls for a very major change in our lifestyle, in our own appreciation for what sharing security means. If we continue to think the way I just represented in a stylized and perhaps exceedingly gruesome way, millions or more people will become drug dependent. As long as they are marginalized, there are so many people, and more so around the world. The world has never had such a skewed income distribution, and more coming because of all these disasters. More people will become drug dependent. Certainly in the third world. That is a message we are sending loud and clear. Perhaps not so much in the US and not so much in Europe, but certainly in the third world. And more vulnerable women and children will become the victims of these various predators for sexual exploitation, for labor exploitation, or whatever. And billions of dollars will be that originally should have been spent in schools, hospitals, and whatever else will be squandered by corruption. There is another element there which we don't seem to attach importance as perhaps in terms of social priorities we should. My emphasis, the emphasis of my own statement today, that all of this, whether drugs or safety or modern forms of slavery or corruption or whatever else, is not somebody else's problem. It is our problem. It is our problem because it may hit us or our countries. It is our problem because if someone else in our society is affected, or in other societies, we should feel it as our problem. But then there is also a very selfish reason. We are citizens of an ever-increasingly interdependent world, a globalized world. Mankind is not only our business, a business actually in the business sense of the word, but if something happens somewhere else, it could very well flash back to us and in our own backyard or in our own even front yard. Therefore, I applaud the initiative of Louise Bruin This is the third year in a row that she brought together the world leaders of different sectors to deal with all of these matters. Let me very simply stylize 3 or 4 areas. Drugs, of course, this is my own flagship type of theme, human trafficking, corruptions, and then a quick closing. Let's begin with drugs. Drug control, it is a sort of political commitment by member states, by the world, quite old. Together with anti-slavery, the traditional anti-slavery, and anti-piracy at sea, drug control is probably the discipline where international agreements are the oldest. Actually, I can even pin down at the date when drug control started in the 19th of February 1909 in Shanghai, when the first convention well, the negotiation for the first convention started, signed about a year and a half or 2 years later. But drug control has moved quite successfully in many respects. In our report, we even claim that at least in the rich countries, the drug problem is stabilized, whether it's production or trafficking or consumption. But a lot of that has been function of drug control agencies, supply control or trafficking control or law enforcement. They have an important role to play, but I don't think this is the solution. I used to elaborate a sort of an argument and saying, let us suppose that we seize all the drugs being produced this year. Well, next year there will be as much produced. So what's the point? I mean, yes, we have to, and I salute those law enforcement officers who even die on the job, but still this is not the solution to the issue. Drug control can only succeed if we attack at the same time demand and supply, and attacking demand, this is a society-wide engagement. It's everybody's job, not only our own individuals or our neighbors. As parents and teachers, we have to make sure that our children develop the self-esteem, make smart choices, and engage in healthy activities. So parents, I think everything starts at home. I'm referring to drug control, but it could go into many other dimensions. And then the social support for the development of family-based programs, preventing marginalization that obviously inevitably leads to one sort of drug dependence or another. Healthcare, we don't just get it that drug addiction is an illness, just like cancer or, for that matter, diabetes. And unless we understand that this is it's an illness which may start with genes, or it may be developed during pregnancy, or it may be developed after post-pregnancy, or it may be developed later on in life because economic and social conditions, but it becomes an health problem, just like diabetes. Maybe in the genes, but it may be just eating habits. And so as long as we don't recognize this, we are not willing to provide better understanding, prevention, and treatment as we should. Then we have the role of the big players on the market, media, for example, and televisions, and let us say Hollywood style, and celebrity. They glamorize what they do. They are being mimicked. As I said, getting into trouble with some of the celebrity, a snort here and a snort there. They destroyed the Andean countries, and they destroyed Africa, through which a lot of cocaine now is being trafficked into Europe. So I see, as far as drug control, and to conclude on this, yes, supply measures, yes, law enforcement, yes, hitting the baddies, if you wish, but parents, social workers, the governments, healthcare, media, and everybody else has to play a role. If we do that, then we would have a vaccination, a sort of a civil vaccination injected into our own body and everybody else's body, and I believe we can progress.